There were street battles in Baltimore between their partisans and others, people shooting at each other at the polling place.
Today on The Soul of Life, I speak with Dr. Matthew Green, a professor of political science, about cancel culture, conspiracies, and how to stay hopeful and connected to one another in an age of identity politics.
There are things in American politics now that are not pretty, but these things have happened before and they've been worse in our history.
Dr. Green is an expert on the American Congress, and I ask him if it's possible to ever imagine our leaders practicing the discipline of relationship building and compromise in the political process.
That compromise is central to how our country was created. It's how we've lasted as long as we have, and you can't really succeed in politics, particularly in Congress, if you don't compromise.
Are we such a divided country, really? You've heard me speak before about how our mindset, what we choose to focus on, determines the results we get. And I wonder if we need our sense of vision restored, our sense of imagination and humility nurtured. Instead of gravitating towards leaders who claim to have it all figured out, I wonder, would it hurt us to set the bar higher, to look for more spiritual leadership qualities in political leaders?
It's not about absolutism. It takes, as I think Weber said, it's the slow boring of hard boards. It takes a long time and a lot of work, and it's not pretty.
We touch on the history of identity politics and political paranoia in its latest form, cancel culture.
The first example that comes to mind is the Red Scare era of the 1950s with Senator Joe McCarthy. Once your name got out in the newspapers or in a hearing, you couldn't get a job. You would get fired.
I wonder, is there something about our history, something about our past in these United States that sets us up to have periods of intense culture wars played out in public life?
I often think of the American dimension of this as an element of our Puritanism, political Puritanism, if you will.
We talk about how listening to each other in the art of compromise is the foundation of politics, but how that seemed to change in the last century as elected officials realized they could no longer hide from media coverage as they bent and capitulated to forge working deals with opponents.
One of the first things that you learn when you study Congress, if you didn't know it already, is Congress is not a very popular branch of government. And a lot of that cynicism about Congress, some scholars have argued, comes from people seeing how Congress works. Before the 70s, a lot of what they did was behind closed doors.
How can we stay focused on things that build our connection to our common goal of solving problems?
There are too many people who believe what they're reading on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. They're not checking their sources, and that's not healthy. We need to have an informed public and people who really know what facts are, what is true and what's disputable.
And what does a historian of American politics like Dr. Green say about the strength of our union?
The State of the Union is pretty strong. I think it could be made stronger.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.